Hey, notice the new upload schedule? Yeah, I know I didn't actually tell anybody, I just kind of did it, but here we are! Alright, let's watch the episode. I've been playing the PS4 remake of Ratchet Clank recently, and I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. You'd imagine that since this game was going to be an adaptation of the movie, which itself is an adaptation of the game, that there was a good chance that this was going to be the cash-in type of game. You know, like that Ghostbusters game. By the way, holy crap! How are people on about that movie when this game is out here completely forgetting anything that was actually good about Ghostbusters? I mean, the characters barely talk to each other. What is Ghostbusters if not characters playing off of each other? I mean, the third act of the new movie might kind of fall apart, but at very least the cast is a riot. The Ghostbusters game? Literally the opposite. But that's not what we're supposed to be on about, is it? Right, Ratchet and Clank. Surprisingly, Insomniac was able to take the opportunity of the whole situation that we should be seeing more and more of in this age where we get remasters and re-releases. Instead, we got a fresh coat of paint. At first, I didn't notice the extent of what was done here with Ratchet and Clank PS4 until I watched a speed run of the original game during Games Done Quick, and things became clear. What was done here was a meticulous comb-over of the original game to see what could be brought up to modern standards. Luckily, those things weren't things like stupid DLC and season passes, while keeping a deadly vice grip over what made the original game worth remaking in the first place. Many locations are visually upgraded, but carry a sense of familiarity that allows for the best kind of fan service. That is, the kind that is able to look at the fan and do a nice little wink, but without the new guy noticing anything has happened at all. It's enough to have made me consider the benefits of a developer being able to look back on what it's created in the past to make new progress. There can be a significantly stronger focus on actually making a quality experience when all the groundwork has already been laid. Such as, for a relevant example I guess, the remakes of Pokemon Gold and Silver back on the Nintendo DS. As a whole, the game itself finds itself significantly less unchanged than Ratchet & Clank PS4 or even its own remake successor Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but that's because Gold and Silver were so well made in the first place. This allowed the developers to instead experiment with their own best creation. We got, at the time, 493 sprites that could follow us around, significantly upgraded phone systems that made it possible to re-challenge the already robust gym leader roster, cleaner visuals, better puzzles, new cutscenes, a much better unknown subplot, and even finally got an explanation as to what the heck your rival's problem was in that game. Not a single one of those things detracted from the reason the game was worth remaking either. This is also why it's a better remake than Omega and Alpha also. Those needed a ton of retooling and adjustment, mostly because Hoenn sucks. Not to mention the fact if you want to reasonably play either Ratchet or Silver version, you pretty much have to play these or put forth a significant amount of work into even getting them. It's no secret that the preservation of games as a whole has been half-hearted at best, and would indeed be better served by an industry that gives its own history a shred of dignity instead of completely forgetting it. However, without a massive shift of focus, it seems that we're stuck with fan efforts and PC gaming for now. As long as that's the case, we are much better served by a well-made remake than a forgotten classic. Too often, games come and go through the public consciousness, and very few ever manage to stick in the mind. With the girth of releases all year long, how many people are really willing to dig out an old PS2 or slap batteries in the old Game Boy Color to sink hours into a game that they're not sure will even be worth it? And I know that hurts some of us gamers to even think about, but it's true. many people would rather have an average but conveniently accessible game than a better but more difficult to obtain game. Though, let us not forget who's really responsible for the situation in the first place. And while all of this is true, it's not a good truth. When we forget the long list of titles that have helped to shape gaming as a whole, we find ourselves stuck with only the games of a few years ago to help us determine the good from the bad. And even many of those are going to find themselves cut off with the news that Nintendo will likely kill the last of backwards compatibility in consoles with the NX. Keep in mind too, that there are tons of younger gamers that are growing up right now having no idea of a time where games didn't have updates or season passes or annualized releases. For them, the worst aspects of gaming are as normal as cell phones. Now think about the near maniacal hype that is built around games such as No Man's Sky. Despite not having played any part of it, or really understanding it, seriously, I've watched nearly everything that there is on this game and I'm still not sure I know, a quasi-religious following is spawned around this game as if it were the Bernie Sanders of video games. Fans of the game have lost their minds over every little setback, and are burning down the game's subreddit right now over the notion that the game may be a bit more like Bernie Sanders than they realize. A decent effort, definitely noteworthy, but not going to change every aspect of your life. Why the fanaticism over a game? Is it only because it's different or ambitious? Could it not also be a desire for a genuine classic? An age-defining game like the ones talked about in the generations past? Now that might sound pretentious, but we do like to pedestal many classic games, not unlike the way that many were making No Man's Sky out to be. And that isn't even the only game this generation to be expected to change the world. Remember when Destiny was going to be the game to radically change gaming forever? The funny part about all of this is that if older games were more regularly accessible than they are today, many of the frantic would remember or at least realize that most games often fall into the pretty decent category, even the ones that we may fondly look back on. Gaming's history is built on decades of trial and error, of sequels and changes, years of passion and experimentation. And the games of today are being built by people who did play those games of yesteryear, and hopefully with inspiration and admiration in their hearts. But if the audience isn't able to identify that, then they're only going to keep looking for the next legendary game, not realizing that the ones of the past were more often the ones that were built upon or aware of the titles that came before them. Think about it. The Legend of Zelda wouldn't have come without the desire to break the boundaries of arcade games. Mega Man 2 needed a Mega Man 1. Wolfenstein evolved into Doom, which evolved into GoldenEye, which evolved into Halo, and you get the idea. History is important, which brings us back to the case of remaking games. Being able to revive or even just bring a game back into the spotlight for a little bit gives that game a chance to inspire anew. And it may not be exactly the same, but when it's being made with heart and integrity, how bad can it really be? The original is still there no matter what, but the new version can appeal and delight those who may have never played it before or maybe even didn't like the original. After all, the Ratchet remake sold so well that we may even see remakes of the latter games, which could lead to a streamlined and updated presentation of the entire series. And that's pretty dang cool. Ultimately, protecting artistic history, whether through imitation, emulation, or preservation, is critical to the understanding and the growth of the medium as a whole. And that's why you should get over that Ghostbusters remake. I need a funny clip for the end. What's a funny thing I can make fun of? You know, it's pretty funny that Gumshoes is most definitely supposed to be the Sherlock Holmes of Pokemon, but is definitely going down in history as the Donald Trump of Pokemon. I find that funny. This isn't really a good ending gag.
Mr. Zircon is here to kill. Have you been killed by Mr. Zircon yet? You are not dead yet. Mr. Zircon intends to rectify this.